Blessings, everyone. Welcome to the Walk with Faith podcast with Evan Rains. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Evan. How are you?
Hey, you're welcome. I'm doing fantastic. Good to hear from you. I love this opportunity, and thank you very much. And hello to everybody out there.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. I'm very grateful that you decided to come on the show and share your passions, your journey, your faith, and guidance and messages with the viewers. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, of course. My pleasure.
So, Evan, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah. So, again, Evan Rains. I'm 40, almost 2 years young. I have 5 beautiful babies. I got 2 wonderful stepkids. I got a wife, and we're rock and rolling. And I've been on a really long journey like this. I know I'm just kind of like getting straight to it, but I don't really know how to describe myself or characterize anything about me at this moment without talking about that, because I kind of feel like, and I don't know if anybody out there will resonate with this, but it's like when you have a major transition, metamorphosis spiritually, and you like this inside out kind of transformation, at a certain point it becomes, there's such a dichotomy, and you're like, my God, my old life, quote, seems like a foreign, like a movie I watched, and now I'm here, and all I know is what I know right now. And so that's kind of what I call like the eternal now, because in reality, like right now is the only thing that actually exists, and above us in terms of dimensional stuff, everything's already happened. So like we are here, all of it's combined right now, and we're moving forward through it. And so I'm like, well, and that's kind of, no, I don't think it's really coincidental that actually, in order to move forward effectively in your life, no matter who you are, where you are, you do kind of have to divorce yourself from the past and just like focus and fix your sight on the future. So, I have a life that has previously just been marked by, from day one, just terrible, sickness, near death, just horrible abuse, like not from like my parents or anything, but like, I was dead on the table when I was 4 weeks old from double pneumonia, lungs collapsed, and that my parents were like accepting the fact that I was about to die. And I had pneumonia, I think 30 sometimes by the time I was 12. I probably lost 15% of my lung tissue, apparently. I missed 50 days of school a year, every single year until I was, I think, 7th grade. And then, endured, 3.5 years of sexual abuse from like an older kind of like outside family member. And that was really hard, and it affects you in so many different ways for so long. And so many of the manifestations of trauma and abuse, it's not always so straightforward, right? Like you think, oh, it's going to make me feel really bad. Well, but then it actually kind of spider webs out, and you start seeing these things as you grow older. They're like, my God, this is actually all tied to the same thing. And like this feeling of, worthlessness, and just like that I'm just this gross, broken thing. And so that was something that I had to deal with, and then 14 years old, I had a traumatic brain injury, like mucho, what they call a acute subdural hematoma, because I was a BMX bike racer, and I had a huge crash and smashed my head. And that was a pretty miraculous story. And if you don't mind, I'll take a few minutes, because I think it's one of my kind of like seminal stories.
Absolutely.
This is like when I realized for sure that, God's hand was like not only on me, but like protecting me, and that there was a reason for it. So I, had this huge crash. I was, doing all these like dirt jumps and like, tricks and stuff. It was this big jump at this track up in Dayton, Ohio. I lived in Cincinnati at the time. Overshoot the landing. Like, of course, it was like the last run of the day for me. It was super hot out. I tell my mom, I'm like, hey, I'm just going to do one more, but I'm taking my helmet off because I'm like super hot. I thought it was too cool for school, so I took my helmet off. and I hit this jump. My pedal kind of like clips the top of it, and I start careening sideways. I mean, this is like major, like huge jumps, 25 feet in the air. And I realized, like, oh crap, so I kicked the bike away from me because I'm like, I don't want to get tangled up in that thing. So I fall, I overshoot the whole landing, and I hit directly on my right side of my forehead on like the concrete type dirt, and it was unbelievable, like the pain, just the searing pain. I'm just like screaming, and luckily my mom was there. She's the only person there. So she runs up, and she's always been like, she's a like prayer warrior. Okay, like this woman is just a very mighty spiritual woman with like a tremendous capacity. And because I watched her as I grew up, praying in the spirit, right? Like what people call like praying in tongues and whatever. Like I just knew what I heard. And you're talking 3-4 hours a day. Like she's just constantly interceding for everybody all the time. And so I got to understand that she was just like, she was pretty powerful in that regard. And like she helped a lot of people. So she comes running over, and I'm laying there, and I see how upset she is. So I'm like trying to compose myself, even though I'm in like unbelievable pain. But she immediately starts praying in the spirit, right? Like in another language. But at that moment, I could literally understand everything she was saying, like as I was hearing it in English. And she was rebuking like death and like commanding it to leave. Like I was like, that's insane. And I don't know what's happening here, because it was just a glimpse into what was happening. So then I get up, and she's still like crying, weeping, praying, and I try to get myself together, and I actually carried my bike back over to the car, loaded it up as XYZ, so we go home. And because at the time, this is 1997, there was a kind of a lot of mythology regarding head injuries at the time. They're like, well, you shouldn't go to sleep. Like, don't take a nap, right? Because you'll just die. I don't know why, but like that's what everybody believed. And so I go home, immediately take like a 3-hour nap, and it's weird because I actually woke up. I felt better. Mm-hmm. I was like, maybe this is no big deal. So then I actually go to school the next day. But then by 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm acting weird. My teacher's like had enough of me and sends me to the principal's office. And so I ended up going home early because they basically kicked me out because I was acting weird. Took another nap, got up, felt even better. I was like, hey, Dad, let's go throw the baseball around because it's baseball season. It's April. By the way, this is the 4th month of my 14th year, so like 144.
Wow.
Which also happens to be the sum of my current address, which is also weird.
Oh my gosh.
So he throws me the ball. I throw one ball, and I feel this like electric shock, like 50,000 volts go up my shoulder, into my neck, and into my head. And then I collapse. And the next thing I know, I'm like at some other medical place, and I don't know who I was. I couldn't even tell who my mom was, and she's sitting right there. And they do this CT scan, and they're rolling me around in a wheelchair. And it just so happened that one of the like world's most like preeminent like neurosurgeons was doing a teaching training thing for like 2 weeks at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and his name was Dr. Kerry Crone. And so he takes my case, and he had like 200 other neurosurgeons from all over the world there. So he was doing this as a training, and he comes up to me. I'm sitting in a wheelchair, my parents are there, and he's like, Evan, I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at your CT scan, and you should have been dead 4 hours ago.
Wow.
And so it's a weird, like, you kind of automatically feel worse once you hear that. Like, all of a sudden these symptoms kind of jump out of nowhere. And it actually started to get pretty bad. And so I started like having seizures, and, they give me all this crazy medicine to do that, which created some of the most intense pain I've ever experienced. And whole point is it really, really went down deep, and they were like, hey, not only do you have all this blood, I had a pint of blood in my brain, like pushing pressure on everything, and 5 blood clots all over my brain, and one of them in particular was very large. And I think 2 days after that, they said, hey, look, we have to go in there and do brain surgery to try to get this blood clot, because if we don't, he's definitely dead. And also, you got a 50-50 shot of dying on the table while we're doing it because of where it is and how big it is. And so my mother, this goes back to her again, this is kind of where this story kind of wraps up in terms of, but she was like, no, I don't buy that. I don't believe that. I don't accept that. So she asked this guy, she goes, how small does that blood clot have to be by tomorrow morning for you to not do this surgery? And he just dismissively, like, didn't even answer her. He was like, that's a ridiculous question. Anyways, I'm going to keep telling you what I'm telling you. And she stopped him again. And she's like, no. I want you to tell me, how small does it have to be by tomorrow morning for you to not operate? And so he kind of dismissively, like, says, well, I suppose if it's an eighth of its size. And she goes, all right, thank you. And, like, I guess she just went to work, and, like, she called all these, other, spiritual people and, prayer that she knew. And I think like an hour and a half later, she comes back in the room and says, I just want you to know that there's at least 7,500 people praying for you right now. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of people. I was like, I'm impressed, mother. And so, but I go get up the next morning, 4:30 a.m., they roll me down to the CT because they got to do a pre-operation CT scan. And I'm not kidding you, I have the documents from my parents, like the thing, and to the micron, okay, which is a very, very small unit of measurement, was an eighth of its size.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Right. And so that was me kind of having a moment, like, where I'm like, wow, you really are there, God, and I don't exactly know what is going on, but I appreciate it. And like, it was amazing. It was just, and it wasn't the end of it, because they were like, oh, you're going to be a vegetable. And then I wasn't a vegetable. They're like, well, you're going to have severe, like, incapacitating cognitive, disorders and learning disabilities. And when I didn't have that, they were just like, well, we don't know what's going to happen. So I just kept dodging bullet after bullet.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, I still had to learn how to walk again. I could bathe myself, I could feed myself. That took 10 months. And that was just a long thing, but like the miracle of it, and the miracle really that has followed me my entire life, is so many things have been trying to kill me. And like literally with the asthma stuff, as a kid, the Lord showed me, like, they've been trying to like stop you from talking. It's because it's your voice they want to stop. It's literally your voice and your mouth they want to shut, because they know what you're here to do. Because I believe, darkness and kind of whatever the opposing forces actually are, when someone has a high call in their life, I think they see it from conception. I think they see it right away. And I think they immediately just full court press, like, attack you. That's really all I've ever known is just attack, like near death, suffering, loss, just like pain, and then all of the stuff after all of everything I experienced. You have all these mental issues you're dealing with, the depression, the anxiety, all this kind of just torment inside your mind. And I lived with that for another 20 years after. And so I finally got to the point where, after a failed marriage and, being separated for a period from my children, which are like my absolute life. It's the only thing I've ever told God. I'm like, look, I don't care what happens to me. Like, I'll take all the bullets, but you promise me you won't let anything happen to them. Because if that's the case and you agree to that, like, I'm good. I'll do whatever. They can burn me at the stake for all I care.
Right.
Because all I've ever known is pain. So I'm like, whatever, it's fine. And he did. He promised me, because he told me, okay, I want you to go look up Isaiah 54. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Let's go look. And it's literally him promising me all the things that he promises his sons, right? Which is, as it relates to my children, which is like, hey, all of your children shall be taught by the Lord, and great will be the peace upon your children. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Thank you. And that kind of freed me up, because I realized at a certain point after trying to chase money for so long, because you get used to these programming, kind of like these programmed desires and goals that you're told by the world you should want. Well, money's going to solve all your problems. You just need to go work a lot and make a lot of money. And if you don't, you're a failure. If you do, then you're not. No matter how bankrupt or empty you are spiritually, emotionally, mentally, as long as you have money, you're good. Mm-hmm. And so I bought into that. I chased it. And eventually, 2020, 2021, I got it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Look at all this money. I don't know what to do with it. And I was totally unprepared to deal with it, by the way. Because I realized I had never made a plan like beyond that. And the beauty of that is, and kind of the damage really is, like, if you don't have a plan beyond where you think you want to end up, as soon as you get there, everything's going to collapse, because it's your intentions and your plan and your purposes and your will that actually creates that in the first place. So when you go past that and there's nothing there from your intention and your heart and your mind, there's ultimately like a vacuum, right? And so just everything collapses. So that's just a tidbit for everybody if you're listening. Wherever you think you want to go, like, you need to plan 10 times farther and 10 times higher, because if you actually believe what you're saying and what you believe, and you've seen it and you visualize it, you're putting your intention, your energy on it, you're going to get there. But you have to know, like, what am I going to do after this? Because that's not the end, right? It's never the end. It's just the journey. There's like more mountains to climb. There's higher places to go. So, like, don't ever let yourself just say, well, this is all I want, and if I get here, I'm going to be happy. Because that's false. You've got to think ahead, and you got to plan forward, because it's your intention and your perception of everything that determines your reality. And, they always say the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Well, it's actually paved with no intentions. And so if you intend, then you're going to have it, and you'll be prepared. So then you actually prepare yourself for whatever it is you're believing for, so that when you get it, you can actually keep it. All right, so that's a little... I digress. I apologize. So
no, but that was awesome. Thank you for that.
But I got to the point where I just realized the pointlessness of well, I have all this money. I'm doing whatever I want. I have this beautiful home. I have these beautiful cars. I got amazing clothes. I got cool watches. My wife and I are taking incredible trips. My kids, have all the trinkets and gadgets. But I find myself late at night looking in the mirror and thinking to myself, I still feel just as miserable as I did before. So when I wasn't in the present of just constant stimulus, and I actually allowed myself to feel something, then it immediately comes rushing in. You're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I hate this. I don't even, it's so ridiculous, because I'm sitting here with everything I've ever wanted that I thought I wanted, and I had never been closer to wanting to kill myself than I ever had until that moment. And I had, when I was going through the depths of everything after my divorce and the kids and everything, for 6 years, I aggressively wanted to die. I wanted to be out of here so bad. And, I kind of sort of tried a couple times, because I just didn't have it in me, which, that's a good thing. It's not something you should be doing. But I remember thinking, my God, what am I doing? What is the answer then? If this isn't it, what is it? And what do I need to get rid of? Because there's something way off here. And so I just told the Lord, I'm like, look, if you're real and this is really, really happening, and there is a purpose for me outside of soaking up oxygen, I need you to show it to me now. And, kind of as a B clause, I want you to remove giving you express permission, because I'm I don't know how this works. I feel like I have to give you permission, because it turns out you actually do. I want you to take everything away, every single thing, person, idea, belief that doesn't belong, that isn't for me. And I don't care how painful it is. I don't care what I have to go through. I don't care. I want that. Because it turns out in life, the path to totality and wholeness is not what can I add to my life? It's actually a process of like elimination. It's addition via subtraction, because you were created as this divine being that's imbued with the very spirit and nature of God. And the paradox is you're also a human being, right, as well. So you have this physical body, but the dichotomy is you have this eternal spiritual nature that has been around since the beginning, actually. Like in the book of Jeremiah in the Bible, he's like, I knew you before the foundations of the earth, he says, which is like, that's a long time. And so you're like, well, okay, my essence, right, my higher self, there's all these like kind of lines and keywords you hear people say, but truly it's a matter of like remembering who you actually are, right? Because as you go through life and you experience all this programming and all this deception and this literal just matrix of lies that we live in, you believe all these different things and you impute value and meaning onto them because you have the power to do that, because you're actually sovereign and have created power to define things. And it's up to you to define them, which is why God in Genesis told Adam, when it came to all the animals and plants, he's like, hey, you name them all. He just brought them all by and he named them. He's like, whatever you say they are, they are. So he's telling you from the beginning, literally God says in Genesis, I have declared the end from the beginning. So he's telling you exactly what the deal is. And so you're moving through life and you're like, well, I need this, I had this, I've experienced this pain, this trauma, this loss. And so we react to those things, we compensate for those things. And it's like a boxer who has a cut over his left eye. Well, he's going to start shifting his left eye away, right? So you can't hit him there. So we do that in all these different areas to protect ourselves. But eventually, all these walls that we build up to keep out the pain, you eventually, hopefully, realize that actually all those walls and armor you put up also keeps out all the joy, purpose, meaning, and happiness. Because like walls don't discriminate. They just block stuff. Okay?
Right.
So if you're building walls, well, they're going to block whatever was supposed to come through there. It doesn't matter what it is. Mm-hmm. And so you realize, my God, what have I done? I've created this entire identity. I don't even know my identity because none of this stuff makes any sense. And if you really analyze yourself and you think about all the things you believe, all of the things that you've been taught, everything you think has value, all of the definitions you've given everything, you're going to be just blown away when you're like, my God, it's actually, look at all the things I have given control over me. Look at all the things that I have given permission to influence me. And the only reason you have that ability is because you actually are the one that grants them permission, which also means that if I revoke that permission, then it is revoked, right? So whatever you decide, whatever you intend, whatever you impose your will upon, that's really the ultimate point of what God is trying to do with people. He's like, I want you to grow up and understand and remember who you are and the power you have. And so I kind of have this perception that I go through where you can't know who you are unless you know whose you are. And you can't know, unless you know who you are, you don't know what you have access to, right? Because we talk about spiritual inheritance and kind of like heritage, and the Bible talks about inheritance and heritage and all these things just repetitively. Well, he's like, if you don't know who you are, you're not going to have any idea of what I have actually made available to you and what your capacity is when living in the fullness of what I've made you. So if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you have access to. And if you don't know what you have access to, you can't possibly possess it, which means I can't own it, I can't wield it, I can't use it. And so you hear this all the time with people, whether it's Christian churches, just people in general, when they're talking to God, most of the time, it's like they're asking for stuff. Oh, Lord, God, source, whatever, can you give me this? Can you please do this? And the problem with that, and the fallacy actually is, and why it never works, almost never, is because you're basing it at, if you're asking for something, you're automatically inferring that it's not yours to begin with, right?
Right.
So if I'm asking for it, I'm like, I don't think it's mine. And not only do I think it's mine, most of the things we ask for, we're like, I'm not even sure I deserve to even be granted this, but I'm going to ask you anyways, kind of in a sheepish, furtive way, like, Lord, if it's your will, Holy Spirit, God, if you could have mercy on me and give me this request, It's kind of like Oliver Twist or whatever, can I please have another bowl of gruel? Like, that's not how you're to approach it. And so he's wanting you to understand that, like, you can't possess any of this stuff if you don't know if you have access to it. And the problem is, you're supposed to possess all these things, all this power, all this, like, sovereignty and creative juice, because the whole point is for you, because that is a gift given to you, is for you to then give it. You have to share it, right? Like, right. Blessings and gifts are meant to be shared. And so if you don't possess it, that means you can't give it, which indirectly means you're actually withholding it, because you're intended to not only have access to it, to possess it, but to give it. And if you're not, that means you're withholding. And just because you don't understand it or you're ignorant of the process does not absolve you. So it's like, oh, officer, I didn't know the speed limit was 35, and I'm going 90. Like, he doesn't care. He's going to give you a ticket, right? So if you don't know the rules of the game and you don't know the laws that govern our world and this reality, what we call reality, then you're going to have a really, really tough time. And you're not going to understand anything, because your beliefs and what you determine is true internally, right? The universe, literally the way God created it, it's just a mirror. It just reflects. It's like this kind of the feminine energy where, like, you put your seed, your words and intentions out into it. And it's ironic, right? The Bible refers to, like, Jesus as the word and the seed. So God's word. So you put your word out there. The universe is obligated, because it was created to, like, just pre-force, like, take what you give it, multiply it, and send it back to you. So if you don't understand exactly, like, your intentions and your words and your thoughts,
right,
as seeds,
right,
that will absolutely create a harvest that you're going to receive. And it's never just like a corn. Like, if I plant a kernel of corn in the ground and I water it and the sun does its thing and it has a chance to bloom, whatever, grow, and I don't kind of keep the weeds out of it, the bugs off of it, like, it's going to sprout out. And when it's finally done, I'm going to get 8 to 10, maybe 12 ears of corn with hundreds of kernels on each corn, right? On each cob. So, like, you don't just get, it's not one-to-one. Like, whatever you plant, you get a multitude, like an exponential return on. So that's why it's so important to, like, I have got to be careful about what I'm saying, about what I'm thinking, because really it starts as thoughts. Because if I think a certain thought over and over and over, well, all that does is germinate into a word. And then I start speaking that word over and over and over and over. And that further germinates into actions. Eventually I'm going to do it, whatever it is. And so I start doing. And then I reap consequences, right? Good or bad, it's irrelevant. Whatever you're doing, you're going to get the harvest. And so actually, based on your experience of the consequences, whether good or bad, that creates habit, right? Ingrained subconscious actions. And so that's what creates your reality, habits and beliefs. That's what you're creating your entire world. And whether you know it or not, you've been doing it the whole time. So, like, everything you have, don't have, every pain you've experienced, all these things, like, in a certain way, you've kind of created all of it. And yes, there are things that happen, like, external, that, like, oh, I don't have any control over this. Or, like, I can't control the fact that a tornado came and tore my house down, or an electrical outlet blew up and my house burned down, or something happened to me physically, or some guy punched me as I'm walking on the street. No, I can't. But what I can do always is determine how I react to it, right?
Right.
How I frame it, how I define it. And so the really empowering point for me was getting to the idea and the reality that everything in my life has not happened to me. It's happened for me.
Right.
Because it's teaching me, right? And so as you're being purged of all this stuff, and so like I'm actually, as I mentioned on our call the other day, I'm working on a book, and it's so important that people understand like the concept of paradox, and like I call it the God of the paradox, right? Like, so giving up your mountain to find life in the valley. So your mountain, right, is like everything you have built, every idea, everything you've acquired, all of your points of reference, right? Your life as you know it. And then willingly, if you say, well, man, this is just not working out, this isn't as good as I thought, like I want something better, I want something more. Well, the only answer is you have to like take it all apart and you have to deconstruct it. And I taught my children this, you know, through a specific example, and I talk about like, if you're going to go build a big building, and this is everybody's life, you start out with your foundation, whatever it is, when you start building, which is, 17, 18, 19, when you start actually consciously doing things. If your foundation is not correct at that point, and it's off by even, a centimeter, you're going to keep building, and you're going to get to a point where eventually you're so off course that you can't build anymore, because you're like, if I do anything else, it's just going to tip over, right? Because I'm off course, I'm off kilter. And so people have two options when they get to that point. Either I just stop building and I just exist and I plateau for the rest of my life until I'm dead and just self-medicate and explain away and rationalize why I never got anywhere. Or I can tear it all down, start over, rebuild my foundation now, level, and build again.
Right.
Except this time, once my foundation is level and square and secure, it turns out you can build really high and really fast. So there's always like this gradient of like, whatever the level of the sacrifice you're making, like the return on that is going to be greater, right? Because that's just how it's built in. We talk about planting and harvesting, seed time and harvest, all this stuff, sowing and reaping, correspondence, whatever you put out comes back. Well, it's the same if you're sacrificing things, if you're giving up something. Like, God is not going to just leave you there. He sees that, he acknowledges that, he honors that. He's like, this is amazing. I'm going to bless you more than you can even imagine, because you're following the pattern, right? The pattern is whatever I give up, right? The first or the last should be first. All these types of things that you hear throughout the Bible and just spiritual teachings across the world in terms of just humbling yourself. And as I told you the other day, like, true humility is really just fully acknowledging who you actually are and what you actually are. So it's not this faux humility that we see so much today, where everybody's like, oh, it's all BS. They don't actually mean it. It's actually, they're just like humble bragging about like how humble I am. And it's fake. And it's like, they just want to convince you of that because they still want control. They still want power. And so like the people that actually deserve power are the ones that really don't want it.
Right.
Because you understand that, like, I know who has all the power. And if I just be what I am, and I'm super authentic and just honest and obedient to that, then I'm going to also, now we start talking about frequency matching, right? I'm going to be at the frequency that I was designed to be at, which is ultimately going to be a very high frequency. And so by default, just like a radio station, you tune into it, boom, you're going to get whatever is on that station. When you go to a high frequency, you also get whatever lives there. And the reality is like peace, joy, love, infinite abundance, purpose, like deepest fulfillments, like the most amazing love, and all of it is that's where that lives. So getting rid of all these things, like that's the clearing out, right? I told you about, like, if you're gonna plant seed, and like when God plants seed, he's very, very, very particular about the soil he plants in, right? So that process of clearing out of that creative destruction, right? The removal of all the external layers, like your kind of contrived exoskeleton, your ego. Once that's removed and you're back to your kind of original pure state, then he's like, yeah, now we can plant because we've cleared the land, right? We pulled all the weeds, there's no rocks, we tilled it, we plowed it, and it's beautiful and perfect. Now I'm going to put the seed in. And so, like, when you talk about, God, and like how he talks about 30, 60, 100-fold return, and it's how he's like always gets like a million X what he puts in. And as I mentioned before, I told you in Isaiah, right? He says, the word that proceeds out of my mouth shall not return void, but will accomplish and prosper and essentially succeed in the thing that it was sent to do. It always succeeds. And that's because he always clears the land. He never plants unless the soil is perfect. And so that's kind of a big lesson for people. It's like, if you want to make sure that your intentions and your will and your goals and all these things that are like function and like in alignment with your true self really succeed, then my God, you have to take the time to dig it out and go in there into your shadow, into your pit, and confront all that stuff, all that darkness. And it's not about getting rid of all the darkness. You just have to identify it. And like, it just needs to feel seen, right? It needs to be acknowledged. Because the more you suppress your shadow, the more you try to like ignore it, actually the more powerful it becomes.
Yeah.
And the more dense it becomes. And so just look at it. Just go down there. You have to go in there, and you have to look at it, acknowledge it, and stare it in the eye, because like it knows you have authority over it, but you don't know that until you stare it in the eye and actually take authority over it. Then you can say, well, hey, there are certain parts of this that I can assimilate and integrate into my life, right? Like, maybe I don't want to get stepped on and pushed around and bullied and taken advantage of by people.
Right.
So I'm going to learn how to set proper boundaries, and I'm going to like really, really vigorously enforce those boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so some people are going to say, my God, you're kind of a jerk. Like, you're that. No, I'm just setting boundaries, and they're not going to like it. But guess what? You are protecting your identity and your energy.
Exactly. And that's what the shadow does. It's beautiful. It's not something to be feared or to dislike. It's a protector. We acknowledge it. Yeah.
And that's so perfect because, like, I talk about those all the time. So, like, in Genesis, God's like, and he created, let there be light. So there's light. And he's like, and he separated, he's talking about the light and the dark. And it says he separated them. And so what they're saying is, like, he acknowledged that the darkness exists, like it is a thing, and it's just as important as the light, and it actually has its own identity and consciousness, and it serves a very distinct purpose. Because, like, there's no light without darkness to contrast it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just like you look up at the stars in the sky, well, the only reason they stick out is because they're light in the middle of the dark. Mm-hmm. And there are things that have to happen in the dark. There's entire species and like ecosystems that are nocturnal in nature. And it's like, why are we looking at that as if it's anything other than totally part of this beautiful whole? And so explaining that to people, because everyone wants to repress, everyone wants to deny, like, but I can tell you, if you're like trying to be like, I'm trying to get delivered from whatever negative habit or something in my life that is, kind of dark in nature, that's producing a fruit I don't like. Well, you've got to go in there and like look at the thing. Like, you've repressed it. Like repression, suppression is not deliverance. And so if you take authority over it, because everything you're faced with, every obstacle, every trial, every pain, they're being presented to you with the explicit purpose of you conquering them and again taking authority and exercising your own dominion. It's the only reason they're given to you. And so I use this example like video games, and my kids are like video game nuts. And like at the end of every level, right, there's some boss you got to beat.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Well, yeah, you don't get to go to the next level until you beat the boss. And the reality is, it's designed to be very difficult. And so you're probably going to have to try it many, many times. But eventually, you're going to learn, and you're going to gain strength and confidence, and then you can beat it.
Right. Yeah.
And once you defeat it, it's like the greatest feeling ever, right? You're like, oh, like I did that. I actually confronted a thing, and I beat it. I learned. I kept going. I was determined until I conquered it. And that is the kind of willpower that God is trying to elicit from his children. I want you to go be conquerors, right? Like, I want you to go deliver all of the captives via conquering, right? Like, and I talk about like the book of Exodus when like Moses, he's the deliverer, right? Like he was brought up to pull them out of there, but he never got to go across the Jordan, nor did any of the people who actually originated on the trip. It was Joshua, Caleb, and the younger crowd that made it. So like the deliverer got him to a certain point, but then Joshua, like the warrior conqueror guy, came in and actually led him across. So like you have to be a deliverer and a conqueror. And actually, if you're doing it right, it's like Jesus said, I've called you to be more than conquerors. I want you to go conquer, but you're also like, you're delivering everybody, because people just need, like, there is elemental, like, absolute truth, and truth on its own, like source truth, carries its own weight, right? Like it bears witness to itself. Like when you're confronted with truth, you don't have to like it, but you are going to feel it, and you're going to know what it is. And there's a part of you that is going to resonate with it no matter what. And so like, that's what we need in this world. And like, that's how, if I incorporated this into my life, it's called, I told God, I'm like, I just want to know the truth. I don't care what it is. I want it. I want all of it. Because I have to be able to identify it, right? Like the key is I have to be able to hear him. I have to be able to interpret it correctly, meaning I can't have a bunch of junk in my energy signature that's like distorting it, right? And then I have to be able to like take action. And the only way I can take like bold, authoritative action and obey is by not being hung up with all these like tethers, right, to the past, right? Those are things that hold you back.
Right.
That's the chain the dog is wearing around his neck that's tied to the tree. You get to a certain point, you're like, well, I guess I just can't go any farther than this. Well, that's not true. You can cut that chain. Unlike the dog, you have the authority to revoke that and sever it. And so you have so much power. You have so much power. And like, he wants everybody to understand that the only way this entire collective, the entire consciousness of our planet is going to elevate is by a ton of people understanding actual truth about who and what they are and who created them, right? And how do I get in touch with that? Well, you've got to go dig. You've got to go find it. It's like a gold mine. The gold is not just laying out on the ground, okay? Like, it takes work. You have to understand, like, my God, gold exists. How does it exist geologically? How do I get to it? What tools do I need? X, Y, and Z. So, like, if you're not thinking in that term, if you're not thinking in terms of, like, what type of diligence do I need to, like, do, and how much effort do I have to go into, and, like, how specific do I need to get, then you're missing it, because it's not, like, this simple, easy thing. It is, but it's not. It's the simplest, actually, and it's the most basic. But paradoxically, it also requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice and effort. And that's why we talk about, whether the dark night of the soul or shadow work, all these things. Well, that is hard. That is scary, right? Like, you have to go out there into your own personal hell and confront all that stuff. And that shakes you, like, to your core. And it requires a boldness and, like, a fearlessness. So, yes, there is a price to be paid for that. But just because something is simple doesn't mean it's easy, right? I never said it's easy. Something can be super simple, but also very difficult.
That's true.
So, yeah. And, like, I just want to know the truth. Because once you understand what truth is, you can see it everywhere. And you realize that, well, there's truth in all kinds of things. But there's also lies in a lot of things. Because there's no such thing as a lie that doesn't have at least a portion of truth in it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a lie. So I have to be able to distinguish those things. And I have to be able to pick that out. And so, like, one of the key things that I would just teach, like, people, if you're listening and are interested, like, how do I identify truth, especially in this, like, polarized, kind of temporal, superficial world we live in terms of, like, well, how do I know what's true when it comes to whatever, religion, politics, like, money, anything and everything? Well, all you have to do, really, I call it the law of inversion, right? So if the world at large is telling you that X is super important, then you can almost be certain that the opposite is the truth.
Yeah.
So, like, right? Oh, you need to go out and work your butt off and just grind away, and you need to work as hard as you can and sacrifice everything to get a lot of money. You can be certain that the opposite is the truth.
Right. That is
right?
That's the truth.
Yeah,
I can speak on that. I can.
Yeah. Like, oh, it doesn't actually matter, okay, if a kid has two parents or if a father's not in the picture, because fathers don't really matter. Like, we don't really need those guys. Oh, okay. Well, let's look and see how that's worked out for society as a whole. And it's just stats. I don't care what you believe or don't believe about it, but the fact is, it's destroyed, like, culture after culture. So,
right.
like, if it's not true, okay, fathers actually do really matter.
They do.
Or if, yeah, like, it's just part of the deal, right? The world tells you, oh, I don't know, everybody should be divided up by, race, sex, this and this and this. They just want to divide everybody. But you guys are all in these little individual silos, and that's where you belong. And that's what they, like, propagate, and they're just constantly dividing everybody. It's all this intersectional identity stuff. Well, the opposite is true. Really, we're all interconnected. We all come from the same source. We all have, like, a million times more in common than what, like, would in fact cause any division. And we all actually, if we let go of all of that baloney, all of the lies that we're being told, because this goes back to, like, what are the things that are trying to control you? Why are they so interested in making me believe certain things? Like, it doesn't matter where it's coming from. And I'll go even to the church, right? The church says, well, you got to go to church and you have to, give us your money. And if you don't come here, you can't get in touch with God. They've, like, set themselves up as this, like, middleman. When the whole point of Jesus, right, and Christ was to literally make a way for you to reconnect in oneness with Father, right, with Source. Well, then, my God, I think they're lying. I don't think they're being honest. I think they may have an ulterior motive.
Right. I agree.
The church, all it does, okay, just like every other gigantic hierarchical power structure on earth, all they do is create dependence. And so you are led to believe that I have to have this. I have to have somebody. There has to be someone above me. And they're supposed to tell me what to do. Well, the reality is it's not that way. And if you go back to the Old Testament, God is like, come on, Israel, you don't need a king. Like, you really don't. I could just be your king. You could be my people. And we'll just, like, dominate this whole place. But then they're like, no, man, like, we really do need a king. Look at all these other countries, like, they have a king, and they're laughing at us. They're making fun of us. So we don't like being made fun of. So can you please just give us a king? So he's like, fine, here, go. And they get Saul, who is, like, a nightmare, right? And so, like, everybody's like, oh, crap. And so then they realize that, and he finally gives them like a good king in David. But like that's the thing, God never needed someone to be in between of you, like you and he. So Jesus was literally like, I am the way. Like I'm not. It's not about me. Jesus didn't come here to create a religion about himself, right? Because like Christianity is the religion about Jesus, but like the religion of Jesus in truth was Judaism, right? Like he never stopped being a Jew.
Right.
That's what he was the whole time. And I'm not saying go be Jewish. I'm just saying it was all about you coming back and returning
to source,
to oneness with source, with Father, or with
exactly.
Papa, as I call him.
Exactly.
And that's why the Bible calls Jesus the second Adam. Like he was the guy that undid what the first guy did, right? And that's the story. So I'm not saying it's like literally exactly what happened, but I am saying that I think we were kind of kicked out of the nest, okay, in the beginning, so that we could grow and learn. Mm-hmm. And so I talk about this in terms of like throughout the entire Old Testament, it's always like this father-child relationship. It's father, I am the God and you are my servants and it's this very authoritative power structure. Then after that, into the New Testament, it becomes not a father-son thing, but a husband-wife thing. It becomes bride and bridegroom, which is like you've matured, you've grown up, and now you can stand with me as co-creators because you actually know what the heck is going on. And we can kind of like rule together. Mm-hmm. Just like a king and queen, right? Like nobody really distinguishes between the king and queen. Like, yeah, the king's the king, but the queen is also still like kind of a big deal, right? Historically. Mm-hmm. So that's where he's trying to get everybody to. It's like, I want you to get to adulthood. I want you to understand how this works. I need you to take back your power and stand up in it and be bold about it and just create and do. That's why in Genesis, the only three things he ever told humanity was like, I want you to go be fruitful, I want you to go multiply, and I want you to take dominion over the earth and subdue it. And subdue just means I want you to overpower it with superior force. That's literally what it means. Like you go overpower it. And that's all he ever said. And so only after, the quote, fall of man, did any other rules come into play. Mm-hmm. And so you notice also, kind of like equal opposite, when Jesus came around, he's like, no. The old law, the 613, like, Levitical laws, like, those were like a tutor. Those were like a teacher and a disciplinarian for you guys because you were kids and you didn't know anything. But now, he goes, I'm just going to say it's two things. Actually, it's three things, which is like love God, right, with all your heart and mind and body, and then love others as yourself. So in that equation, as I mentioned, you're actually number two. Like you have to love you,
right,
totally first, and you can only do that after you understand how much God loves you,
right,
and only then can you give that.
Yes.
And that goes back to my knowing who you are, what you have access to, can you possess it, and can you give it? You have to possess it first. And that's really the whole point. It's like everything's coming back into this confluence of everything happening now. And that's why. And again, I'm not like trying to be some preacher guy.
No.
But I can tell you that like Isaiah chapter 60, for example, talks about how rejoice for the light has come. And it says the earth was in darkness and its people in total darkness, meaning like gross darkness, like the absence of any light. And so that's prophetic that I'm telling you, it's talking about right now, because I don't know that, outside of like a massive world war, which, who knows, right? It could totally happen. Plagues and everything else. It's pretty dark out there. And so, but he says right after the next verse, after total darkness is, but the Lord, right, shall be shown, will rise and be shown above you, and it would be shown upon you. The glory of the Lord will be upon you. So only at the darkest point, and that goes back to the cliche, right, of it's always darkest before the dawn, right?
Yeah.
People say these things, but they don't actually know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're saying.
Right.
He's literally saying when it gets to be the darkest when I'm going to show up and like blow it all out.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we are, because like that's Isaiah 60. Joel chapter 2 verse 2, talks about the day of darkness, right? The whole like minor prophet section of the Old Testament, all they're basically talking about is what they refer to as like the day of the Lord, right? Like the terrible day of the Lord, like this judgment, right? Because like when you're, pulling cards and doing your thing, and a lot of other people, right? The judgment card, the justice card comes out, right? Like the hanged man. Like there are things like that have to die, and there is a balancing that has to occur.
Of course.
Before the elevation. And so like one of my favorite phrases is like, prior to elevation, there must be separation.
Of course.
And so it has to happen. And so he's saying, like Joel 2, right? Chapter 2. And he goes, verse 11, like, it's going to be pretty rough. And he literally says, who can endure it? And so, yeah, it's going to be really tough. But he says, only those, right, who turn to me or return to me with all their heart. Ironically, that's what Jesus said to do. And when they hear, you hear the word repent a lot in church. Well, repent literally originally just means to return. It just means go back to where you were. Like go back to your mark, your place. Because everybody has a place. And you think about like performance and Broadway plays and like TV. Well, get on your mark, right? So the camera can catch you right, so you can do your thing and play your role. If you're not on your mark, you can't, the whole thing is messed up. So turn to me with all your heart. And your heart just means energy, right? That's when he says he judges you by your heart, your physical heart. He's talking about your energy signature, right? He's talking about, because he is energy. So he's looking at you and like, oh, is this a clear, bright white, or is it like kind of dull and is there junk in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's looking at that. And that's what we're all picking up when we look at each other anyways. That's all the subconscious stuff we do.
Mm-hmm.
So like he says, rend your heart, meaning tear open your heart, like open it to me. And that goes back to Psalm 34 when it's like, open up you gates, right? So the King of glory may come in. Like you've got to open it so he can come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a recurring theme, actually. And like Isaiah 60 verse 11 is like, he's talking about once the glory comes, he's like, your gates shall be continuously open. Meaning they're always open. He goes, day and night they shall not be shut. Right? So that men can bring to you the wealth of the Gentiles and their kings in procession. Because he's like, when your gates are open and then you and I are one, everybody is going to be working for you because they all work for me. Right? Like, that's called power and that's called true identity.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants that. He wants to unify you with his power. So it keeps going, right? It's like Joel's like begging him, like, don't give your heritage to reproach. Like, don't turn your back on what you promised us. And that's Isaiah 54:17, which is like, hey, this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, or the sons of God. And their righteousness, meaning right standing, meaning being in the right place with the right relationship to me, taking your authority, taking your seat at the table, right? That comes from me. That you actually have to climb that mountain and take your seat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much like voluntary effort and like, not so much effort, but like there's things we have to do.
Of course.
And so I'm going to wrap this up with saying like, remember I told you about like the little boat on the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are this boat, you're on the water and you put your sail up. And if you're truly just like released and surrendered and you yield, right, to the flow, well, then all of a sudden the wind blows and it takes you wherever it takes you, right? And it's always the most perfect place. It's generally not what you expected, but it's always better than what you expected.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything that God wants to do, everything that source in the universe he created wants to do is to just bless you beyond what you can even ask or think. And that's even a scripture reference, like beyond anything you can ask or think. And that's because it is beyond us, right? But it does say, however, in the New Testament that we are, like, Jesus is the head of the body. And it says we have the mind of Christ. So people talk about consciousness. meaning like I have access as a part of this body to like the all, like every knowable thing is within my grasp if I need it, right? Like whatever I need, whenever I need it, I have it. And that's understanding that like there are no limitations. It is infinite. And if you allow yourself to like eliminate all these expectations and all these like definitions, then all of a sudden you give the universe room to like work on your behalf.
Exactly.
So I know that was a long monologue.
It was awesome. It was incredible, and I loved it.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad to be able to do it because I don't usually get to just kind of sit and riff like this. It's a lot of fun.
It's very powerful, and I really it's educational, it's empowering, and it's something that needs to be heard. So I'm really glad.
I agree. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Do you have any other specific questions for me that you kind of wanted to talk about? Since I bogarted the last hour.
This is what it's for. This is for you. For you, it's for God. It's for Source. That's what it's for. Like it's, and for you to share your knowledge and your journey and His knowledge and guidance with people. It's not. No, I'm very grateful for this. It's very yes.
That's awesome. And it was a 3-year like deep dive. Just nothing but, and all these things kind of stack on top of each other, and you realize the farther you get into it, you realize like truly the unbelievable level of like continuity, because you're learning all these individual lessons, but it's only like after you learn them can you actually assimilate them and like synthesize them, and you're like, wow, this actually does all make sense. And so one of the other things I kind of want to point out is like, I know I'm talking about the Bible a lot, I'm doing all this, but I'm telling you, God is He's not saying you just need to do all the stuff that's in the Bible. What He's saying is, and what He's put in my heart to do, is to actually create like this kind of like hybrid, and it's really not a hybrid. It seems like a hybrid, but it's actually just the original intent of, there's all this massive truth. There's this infinite like expanse, and there's so many like unknowable facets of God and what He can do, what He wants, doesn't want, whatever. And most of that is just like, what do you want, right? Like if you think about why did He name Himself when Moses asked him, like, what's your name? He goes, I am. I am that I am. And so you can't say His name without referring to yourself.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So He's trying to tell you, like we are, because He is, and we actually have the same level. Not this, like we didn't create ourselves, but we have that same level of sovereignty, like here. And so, my God, He just wants you to know, like, He loves you so much, and He wants nothing but like the greatest for you, like in every area. But He's also not going to supersede your own sovereignty. He said He wouldn't. And He even said, if I break my own word, I'll destroy myself. Like, that's pretty serious. So, and people ask, like, well, how come there's all this suffering in the world, right? Like, if God's so loving, how does this happen? Why does He allow this? Well, it's because He gave us tremendous authority, and He's not going to supersede it. Like, we do that.
We have the power.
Right? We have the
power and authority to make those changes, and that's where our free will comes in. We have to choose it.
Yes. Oh my gosh! And like even said in the Old Testament, and what was it? I think it's Jeremiah. But like He goes, now I give you, right? You have the power to bless and to curse.
Right.
And all that really means in the original Hebrew is you have the power to create and destroy.
Right.
And you do that with your words.
Thank you.
And your words turn into actions. So all you're doing is acting out your own words and your own thoughts. And so blaming it on God is the like epitome of not only ignorance, but like self-deception and just kind of like projected deception. Because the world wants you to think that you weren't created by anyone or anything. You have no purpose, and you're just this cosmic accident walking around, right? Like this confluence of a trillion different things that just so happen to be perfectly aligned for you to even be here. And yet you have no meaning, you have no power, you have no purpose, right? Again, if the world tells you X, you can be certain the opposite is true.
Exactly.
So you've got to like wake up, stop lying to yourself, because you know you have a purpose. Like everybody, whether they'll admit it or not, I don't care how militant you are, you know that you were created. And you know that everything else was, because it all follows the same pattern. Like nature just repeats itself over and over. They have instinct, they have patterns. There's all these mathematical equations that exist, whether it's pi or Fibonacci. They're just always everywhere. It's all the same. And yet we're like, well, but we are accidents, right? Like,
No, there are no accidents.
Yeah, all the things we do are so creative, like the humanistic.
I mean, there are
narrative.
accidents, but, well, see, right there, you're going to get me going.
Well, maybe.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think,
Right.
I don't think so.
It's almost, well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, what is an accident?
Exactly.
Actually, think about it, right? So when you actually understand that, well, we actually have sovereignty, we use our will and impose
Exactly.
our will. Our
See, here we go.
Well,
Exactly.
Like we did something and we created a chain of events that causes a result.
Exactly.
And all that really means is like we're created.
Exactly.
So, sure, if something happens that seems like an accident, and this is the truth about really anything.
How did we create it?
If something happens that's terrible or really good.
How did we create it?
If it's terrible, we call it bad luck. Mm-hmm. And if it's really good, we're like, well, it's just fate. Because we don't understand what connects us to that thing and how it came to be.
Exactly. Because we have the power and authority to speak our reality.
100%. So, like, when you turn the mirror on yourself,
mm-hmm.
and not in, like, a self-condemning way at all. Because, like, religion, right? Like, power, like, hierarchical, institutionalized religion, given that it is separate from God, and really they have intentionally made it separate, and it's all about what you do and don't do, and it's not about who you are. Mm-hmm. All religion creates, and you'll see this if you look at it, all it creates is two things. There's only two things. It's either pride or condemnation. Mm-hmm. So if I do the things right and I, prayed and fasted and, I gave my tithe or whatever and things worked out for me, well, then I did that and I'm boasting in myself because, like, look how much faith I have. But then there's another lady, right? The woman with 2 kids, single mom with 3 jobs, who's praying and praying and praying for her son to not die from a sickness, who also gave, who also fasted, who also prayed, and then he still dies. Everyone else is looking around like, well, I guess maybe she just didn't have enough faith. And so then she hears that, and she believes that, because she's like, I did something wrong.
Right.
I am worthless because I couldn't do this, because, I didn't have the power, I didn't have the faith, I didn't, whatever. When the point is, like, it wasn't about you to begin with and what you did or didn't do. If you understand who you are and your identity, you would realize, like, well, what did God say? He's like, I am the God who gives and takes away. So, like, yeah, there is an aspect of, like, his sovereignty, but, like, again, sometimes, and you can't explain everything, right? Like, I'm not saying you can sit here and look at everything that happens and be like, well, this didn't do this, because it's an infinitely complex web of, like, intention and wills interacting with one another.
Right.
But you can control, like, how do I react to something, right? How do I process it?
Exactly.
How do I define it?
And that's
how do I
huge.
define it?
That's huge.
Because I know a lot of people who are sexually abused, like me, who are, they are in deep darkness over it. A couple of them have killed themselves, okay? Overdosed. and it's a bear, okay? But I'm not saying like I'm so great. I just had this idea that I'm like, I don't think I should allow this to define me and like direct my whole future.
You're right.
This doesn't feel right. It never felt right. And so I actually ended up forgiving and like making peace with the individual who did all this.
Wow, Evan, that's powerful.
Because I understood that, like, my God, it happened to him too. And so, like, who am I actually blaming? Am I blaming him, or am I blaming his own father? Or am I blaming whatever happened to him that broke him? Or how far back do I have to go?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just decided, like, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be, like, condemned for everything I've ever done. Like, nor do I want anyone else to feel that way. And I know that's like, well, you're being too rosy, you know, that's too... No, I don't think so.
You broke a cycle.
I think that's actually, like,
I think
it's the most human thing to do.
It is. It's... That's very powerful.
That's really my whole point is, like, my goodness, guys and gals, like, you have so much power. You're so important. You're so loved. And, like, not just by God, but, like, literally by me. Like, I love you. And I mean, I see you. And if you were standing right in front of me, you would feel seen and you would feel loved and you would know, just looking into my eyes, that I mean every single word I say. And, like, you have the power to change this. And there are no preset outcomes, really. Like, at least in our reality, okay? When you get into the upper dimensions, like, time isn't a thing, of course, right? Like, everything's already happened. And I think my final point is to give you, like, 3 minutes. People talk about faith, right? All the time. Faith, belief. Like, how do I do that, right? And so many people have this false ideal that faith is something I have to, like, manufacture, right? Like, I gotta crank the engine enough to have faith. And if I can't do it, then all of a sudden I don't have enough faith, and therefore I can't get whatever it is I want. Or I can't get rid of whatever it is I want to get rid of. But here's a very, very key point. So, like, Jesus talks about faith as, like, hey, if you ask and believe, right, that you have received, past tense, what you've asked for, then, like, it's yours. So you think about, like, because the Bible is always talking. Prophetic stuff is so wild because it's like when God was talking to Joshua about, hey, you're going to go up to Ramoth Gilead and destroy these 5 kings that are attacking your people. He's like, don't worry, like, I've already delivered them, past tense, into your hands. And so he's saying it's already been done because I said it. Because as soon as I say it, it's done. So he's talking to Joshua about the past, according to him, meaning I've already delivered them, in Joshua's present, but he's also talking about Joshua's future at the same time. Okay? So, like, what's really, really wild is when you understand what's actually happening. And I challenge every single one of you, like, go look up just the dictionary on any website you want, the dictionary definition of the word future. And, like, you can do it right now if you want.
Let's do it.
I'm literally going to read it.
Oh, are you? Okay, perfect. You do it.
The word future is the time or a period of time following the moment of speaking or writing. Time regarded as still to come. So even here, even on our little, like, dense, dark world, somebody at some point understood that, well, the future only exists after it's been spoken or written. And so, like, ironically, in the Bible, they call the Bible the Logos, right? That's Greek for, like, written word. But they call the spoken word, like, Rhema, R-H-E-M-A. That's the spoken, like, living word, like, right now word. And so you take something from the ethereal, right, from the spirit realm. It comes into your mind, again, because you have the mind, you have the connection to all things. comes in, you think it, and then you say it, you've actually created it right then. And they've seen this. Like when you speak, when people make sounds, when they sing, they can look at the energy field that you're creating as it's coming out of your mouth, and it's a toroidal, like donut-shaped energy field. But then if you want to bring it into the reality immediately, meaning into physical reality, well, then what do? Well, I have to write it. Because now it's here, now it's physical, and I've actually essentially finalized the process of bringing it from there to here. And so when you understand that as soon as I speak and as soon as I write, I've actually created the future already. So the future is, in fact, the past. Right? So the future comes first.
Right.
So when you speak it and you intend it and you write it, it actually already exists in that timeline, because everything outside of our dimension, it's literally like a circle. It's this infinity ring. It's already all been done. So when God says have faith, when Jesus says have faith, what he's actually asking you to do is to see it and understand that what you're asking for has actually already happened. So it doesn't actually require this like workup of faith that I have to generate. I just simply am like, oh, it's already been done. So like, of course I get it. And I give you an example of like, if someone tells you, you're like, oh yeah, we built our house on X, Y, and Z day and we moved in. They're like, no, you didn't. That's not true. Or, I got married on X, Y, Z day, or my child was born on this day. And someone says, no, that's not true. That didn't happen. You're like, what are you talking about? It's already happened. Of course it is true. So you have absolute certainty that the thing that has happened, like, actually did happen, right? So what he's trying to tell you is like, you need to understand that when you speak and write and intend and create with the power that I gave you, that it's the same. That it's already been done. That's Hebrews 11:1 is like, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen, like the tangible evidence, the substance, meaning like you can touch it. I just can't see it. It already exists, and all you're going to do is just keep reaffirming that until you walk into it, because there is a latency between the creation of something in the spirit and the manifestation of it in the physical. Just like when a lightning bolt goes boom and hits, you don't hear it right away. There's a gap, and then you hear the thunder. And that's because your brain can't process it quick enough, and sound travels a lot slower than light. So, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to hear the thunder. It just means it's going to take a second. And when you understand that everything you intend, everything you put out there, just like when you plant a seed in the ground, there is a period of time where it's growing, where it's germinating, where it's sprouting before it's ready to be harvested, before you can take hold of it.
Right.
And you just have to give it that time.
And you have to reaffirm it. You have to stay consistent.
Because, oh my God. And that's exactly when you're planting something, you're tending a garden. That's called, I'm picking the weeds out. I'm watering it. I'm letting it get sun. I'm keeping the bugs off it. That is me reaffirming, speaking, writing, and just convincing myself through repetition that it is. Because once I believe it to be true, then it is true.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That was my kind of like dessert for everybody.
It was perfect. It was perfect. This was wonderful.
Well, we should do it again sometime.
I would love that. Yeah, that'd be incredible. I know you have more to share.
Yes.
This was very, wow. I'm blown away. I don't even know what to say, but this was very important for people to hear. Absolutely. Because
I'm very, very humbled to just be able to do it, honestly.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a long time coming.
No, this is very important. I keep trying to tell people to stay consistent, do the work, but the way that you put it, this is exactly what we need. So yeah, I'm humbled too.
Yeah, you can't do the work and stay consistent unless you're clear on the vision. Right. That's what drives you. Like the fact that you see it in your mind and it's so clear. If you take the time to make it crystal clear, whatever it is you're going for, because it has to be clear. It has to be like
It has to be clear.
Like architectural plans clear.
Right. Exactly.
Because that's the thing. It's like if I'm going to build a house and I've got a set of prints that are detailed and I put all my energy and time and I know exactly what it's going to be, like, how much faith does it require, honestly, for me to be like, yeah, we can just give these to the contractor and he can just build it.
Exactly. You have to have a clear idea of what you want. Know what you want.
Yeah.
Be certain.
Oh my gosh,
and reaffirm it. Clear everything else out of the way. Clear yourself. Do the work. Know what you want. Be consistent. You know.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to get clear, though, and that's why
it does. It does.
Yes, and that's like you have to learn how. It's just like people like. If I want to draw construction documents for my house that I'm building and I want to create it myself, like I probably have to go to school for that.
Like I
have to get training.
Mm-hmm. I almost feel like, Evan, even if it was, you started out simple, like, okay, get clear on, something that you want and stick with it, even if it was starting small, and then building on that, but just stay
then you
consistent.
Can elaborate.
Exactly.
Yes, 100%. That's really those are the two paths. So it's like I either know how to put it together right now, or I'm going to work my way into it.
Mm-hmm. Depending on the individual,
Correct. Mm-hmm. But it still has to be like your intention has to maintain continuity.
Exactly.
Because if you don't have the intention, and that's the thing, like not knowing your why, like why am I doing this? Why do I want this? If that's not crystal clear, then as you begin to seek your what, well, you're going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to like differ as time goes on. Everything is changing. So like maybe you get into it and you're like, man, I don't actually want this anymore. And that's because I didn't address like the fundamental issue of why do I even want it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not enough to just say, what do I want? It's like, why do I
want it? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh.
And so your heart has to be pure to know like why, because only pure intentions, like
they
pure
can't
be
heart.
distorted, right? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, there are tons of people that have negative intentions. The intentions are such that they're totally neutral. So like if you're super intentional about doing something terrible, well, you're going to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's really good, then you're going to achieve that. So like, I'm not saying it has to be pure, but what I am saying that the intention itself has to be pure.
Exactly.
It's either pure dark or pure light.
Yeah.
That's what produces the most like profound results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so thinking about why do I want it? Okay, I got to be crystal clear about why. That requires the same level of clarity. And that's where you have to go deep inside and dig and figure it all out. Mm-hmm. But then the third thing is, once I decide what it is and why I want it, well, then you got to just like go to work, right? Like it requires massive effort, but it's not like contrived, just effort for the sake of effort. Because if you actually do get those first two, by the time you get down to the hard work requirement, you don't even have to think about that. That's not even something that you have to like, well, I got to get to work. No, you're just doing it because you love to do it. And you're like, I'm so pumped about this, I can't help it.
Exactly.
And so like, the only other thing I got is like, maybe your first plan, like, isn't the perfect plan, right? Like, so be flexible, like be willing to like adjust your approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like the process of iteration, right? Like I'm trying to do this, like Thomas Edison, who I'm not trying to say he's great because I don't actually like the guy that much, but he did try 10,000 times before he got the light bulb to work because he finally figured out that tungsten was what he needed. So he kept trying because the goal remained the same, the motivation remained the same, the effort level remained the same, but he had to be flexible.
Right.
So don't get married to like specific outcomes and specific timelines. Like commit to your what and your why, but then like divorce yourself from the how and the when and leave that up literally to the artistry and imagination of the Holy Spirit. Because he's like, I'll get you there, but you got to let me do it because it's going to be better than what you even planned. And that's the whole point. So.
Wow. Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Yes, we're definitely going to have to do this again.
100%.
All So,
keep doing your thing. I appreciate you, your heart, your wonderful, precious woman. I think you're doing a good thing, and I can't wait to see how you like evolve and grow and expand. And like, I'm here to help you if there's anything you need. Like, think something through, whatever. Like, I'm here. So,
thank you, Evan, so much. Thank you. Oh, all right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us on Evan Rain's podcast. Oh, Evan, can you tell everyone? I'm going to post it, but can you tell everyone how to contact you?
yeah, I'll give you.
Like, do you
I mean,
want?
you can just get. If you want to post, like, I don't care if you post my email. Like, that's like I get so many emails, and like I check stuff, like contacts, like on. You want to friend me on Facebook? It's Evan J Rains, Rains. I'm working on all the other stuff. Like, I'm on LinkedIn. You can look at my company, Paysitters, which is a really cool, like, fintech company that helps people pay their bills and like have more flexibility. Paysitters. The app is available in both app stores. Like, honestly, if you're part of like the middle 70% of like people in the country who are living paycheck to paycheck right now, like, I think it's really important. I think it could really help you. So, but I'll leave that up to you. It's paysitters.com. And then LinkedIn, I think it's just Evan Rains. But I'm going to start, like, eventually I'm going to put together a YouTube channel here in the very, very near future. And that's going to be called Truth Unbound.
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming. But,
Yes.
And, like, maybe the next time we connect, I will have it ready by then so that we can actually kind of, coalesce some things and, like, kind of, who knows how we can help each other.
Okay, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan.
All
All right, guys. We're sending you so much love. I love you. Evan loves you. We all love you. God loves you. Oh, this has been so wonderful. So thank you for joining us tonight. And we always pray that you're surrounded by the Most High God's love, protection, and blessings. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.